essentially, these European colonial apparatus or colonial administration systems were imposed after the so-called pacification, that is the brutal putting down of Africans. And after this, the colonialists had to attend to two important tasks. And according to Basil Davidson, these two important challenges for the European powers were: the first was to transform military occupation into civilian methods of rule. And the second task was to find new and more rewarding ways of drawing profit from the colonies. End of quote. And what I'm going to do now is to deal with each of these two tasks in a little bit more detail. So the first task was transforming military occupation, which involved setting up a colonial administration. Michael Crowder points out that, quote, in many respects, the military conquest of the African states proved to be a simpler job for the technologically advanced Europeans than the actual organization and consolidation of effective colonial rule. End of quote. In other words, the fundamental issue for the Europeans was how to maintain domination over huge swathes of territory and with uncompliant subjects. And this proved to be very challenging for the colonial usurpers. In short, military conquest may have been easy, but maintaining control and power over a people who were resisting was by no means easy. It was by no means a walkover. Colonial administration involved the following. That is, in each colonial territory, there was an appointment of European colonial governors in the territory. That is, a European, usually a male, who received orders from their European government, but particularly in the British systems, they could make decisions on the spot as they desired. And below the governor was a colonial administration comprising regional and provincial officers. So you can conceive of the colonial administration being rather a hierarchy or a pyramid. And at the top of this pyramid was the European colonial governor. The next level or rank in authority were the various regional and provincial officers. And at the lowest rung of this pyramid, the colonial administration civil service structure, were district officers who worked in the various localities or districts, who worked in public works, in health and in education. The European bureaucracy, the colonial administration, was a minority. It was very small. And to give you an idea of how small it is, Basil Davidson points out that, for example, in 1938, some 40 million Nigerians under British colonial rule were governed by some 380 British political officials, and 1,163 were in other departments. And essentially, these British officials had to work through a number of African interpreters, policemen. They also worked in collaboration with local chiefs appointed by the colonial government. And the colonial bureaucracy was also made up of an army, made up of African soldiers who were headed by a European general, a European commanding officer. Now, sometimes these African in these lower minions or lower positions abuse their posts, by taking bribes, by bullying, advancing their own interests. So to look at it another way, these colonial systems, gave rise to repression as well as corruption. Now, why were European colonial administrations small in number? A major reason why European officials were small in number was that the European governments did not want the financial burden of colonialism to fall upon European taxpayers. And so, in short, colonial rule had to pay for itself, and the tax that was accrued, the revenue that was generated from cash crops, was used to pay the salaries and costs of the European officials, to pay for the regional and provincial district officers and the colonial governor and their families. It was also used by France and Britain to build clinics and to pay for doctors and to set up agricultural extension services to combat diseases as well, such as malaria and epidemic diseases, and also to set up the few primary schools and secondary schools that existed. So therefore, Africans, were taxed through the introduction of the cash crop economy in order for this tax to be generated. And as Basil Davidson puts it very eloquently, quote, "Very few Africans had asked for colonial rule, but all Africans had to pay for it." And this taxation system all across the African continent, there are many examples that taxation, the hut tax or the poll tax, led to revolts by Africans. For example, in West Africa, Sierra Leone in 1898, Bai Bure, leader of Kassai and leader of the Temni people in northern Sierra Leone, revolted against the hut tax in 1898. In the southern part of the country, the continent, the country of South Africa in particular, there was the Bambata Rebellion in 1906 that again was against the imposition of tax by the British. So taxation was completely new to Africans, and it was deeply resented and resisted. Now, the second task of colonial rule that I'm going to talk about, and then I'll give an opportunity for some questions, is the exploitation of the economies. Colonialism was about exploiting the colonies for the rich economic resources that they possessed. And during the colonial era, Africans were forced to grow or produce, certain cash crops, whether it was cocoa in Ghana or Côte d'Ivoire, groundnuts in the Senegambia or Senegal, cotton in Egypt and Uganda to produce iron ore, rubber in DRC. As we know, Africa is abundant in agricultural mineral resources that were plundered and pillaged for the benefit of Europeans. Rich mineral resources of bauxite, coltan, diamonds and gold, particularly in South Africa, were looted for the benefit of the Belgian and British companies in DRC and South Africa in particular. So the colonial administration was erected to exploit the colonies for these economic resources, and this gave rise to the political economy of extraction, that is, taking out of Africa, looting, a hemorrhaging of resources to benefit the metropole. And in the vast majority of the colonies, regardless of the European power, expatriate firms and companies were given preferential treatment. This slide essentially outlines some of the points that I've made in terms of the cash crops that were taken from Africa, were produced in Africa to benefit the European powers. And the expatriate firms, that is the colonial firms that were given preferential treatment, was also another source of grievance amongst Africans, because they were given preferential treatment to import manufactured goods, usually from their own domestic country, and to export materials back to France or Belgium or Britain. And these expatriate companies, with the backing of their respective governments, also controlled the prices of these cash crops, of these mineral resources. And this led to the exclusion of Africans from the import and export businesses. And the long-term implications of this exclusion was the deindustrialization of African economies. Africans were discriminated against also in the granting of loans from expatriate-owned banks. They were excluded from being shareholders in the profitable mining enterprises that existed, in places such as the Gold Coast, or in plantation cocoa companies in Côte d'Ivoire, or in the gold mines in Ghana or in South Africa, the extraction of manganese and vanadium in the DRC, or in any extractive enterprise. Africans were nowhere to be seen. They were not allowed, they were barred from being shareholders in such import-export businesses. And so overall, the political economy of colonialism was characterized by this gross neglect of industrialization and manufacturing in the colonial territories. And this was to have, major consequences for post-independent African states. That is, the inability of post-independent African states to meet the economic needs of African people. And this is a legacy that remains to this day.